Hey class, this week we're going to talk about how to identify a problem in practice or problems in practice from qualitative data. You're going to learn how to do several types of what is called qualitative coding or analyzing qualitative data. And we're going to talk about strategies or sequences that we can use in order to combine these coding methods together to get at some deeper level trends across the interviews that we'll have conducted with our participants. So each interview is going to have information, but we're also going to learn how to look across those interviews in order to identify bigger, broader themes about a potential problem in practice. So this video is specifically designed that I'm going to be asking you to pause the video at certain points and try out examples, and then we'll talk about the examples and you'll see them completed. But you really need to pause the video at the points I tell you to and try the activities before you continue on and watch the examples and completed examples. All right, so let's start big first. Thinking scientifically about your written responses, which is qualitative data. So we know that sentences are comprised of a subject, what or who, and a predicate, information about what or who, right? So we've got the subject and then information about the subject. This is some core component here. We're going to get scientific about the structure of sentences, paragraphs, and analyzing them. So to that point, there is a method of analyzing sentences, groups of sentences, paragraphs, entire passages, interviews, multiple interviews together. And it's called qualitative coding, or just coding for short. It is not like computer coding, but the term is used for this practice as well. So qualitative coding or coding. And you might be asking yourself, okay, well, qualitative coding, analyzing, well, what are these codes and how do I use them? So a code can be a few different things. A code or codes could be used to summarize the main point or secondary points in a sentence. So you might use a code to explain the main point of a sentence or the main point and secondary points of a sentence. You could also use a code to summarize the main or secondary points of a set of sentences or a paragraph even. We might assign the same codes repeatedly for similar responses from participants. So that could be sentences or paragraphs or groups of sentences. And as those codes are reused, we begin to use them across those participants, in particularly multiple participants. Then what happens is we not only have big themes from a participant, but across participants as well. We can look at which codes appear most frequently within a participant's interview and across participant interviews. So if some theme constantly appeared inside of a participant's interview, and then you saw that same theme appear across other interviews that you had coded, you can say, wow, this is something that's a trend across my participants. So we're going to talk a lot more about that. That's really high surface level, and that's the goal right here. But we're going to talk about strategies, see examples, and apply them during this lecture. But our goal is to use these codes for a particular sentence, groups of sentences, paragraphs across participants as well, in order to identify a problem in practice. So these themes we find across our qualitative data, our interviews, across our participants, will contribute to us building a summary that helps us understand the problem or problems in practice that exist. The key here is that we are looking for the main themes that participants have each talked about, and then the shared themes across those participants. All right, let's dive deeper into the specifics now. There are many types of qualitative codes, but for this class, we're just going to be using two of them. And these are really the two core ones from which a lot of other types are built off of or inspired by, I would say. So there are many, many types out there. You could spend infinite amounts of time learning about all of those, but for the sake of applied research related to special education and secondary transition and the work that we're doing in identifying problems in practice, these really are the core types of codes you'd be using. And the nice thing about these two is that they're like the parents or grandparents of a lot of the other types of codes and coding methods that are out there. They're really like the foundation. So the first one is a descriptive code. This is created as you review your data. So you're reviewing the data and you're assigning these codes to the data as you review it. The data being your interview responses from your participants. What it is, it's a word or short phrase that's your own words to describe what a participant is talking about. So rather than using a direct quote, you're saying a word or a short phrase that describes what the participant is talking about. Usually, we would do this for a group of sentences in order to summarize the main point. The other type of code you'll be using is called in vivo. Just like descriptive, you're going to be reviewing the data and assigning this code. But the difference is, instead of assigning a word or phrase to describe what the participant is talking about, you extract a word, phrase, or quote that explains either a main code or a subcode. So you might have a descriptive code that is really describing something that's happening. Let's say age-appropriate transition assessment is your descriptive code, and you assign that to a passage of the response that your participant gave when they were talking about using age-appropriate transition assessment. And you also pulled out a meaningful quote to help articulate or describe further what transition assessment looks like in that example. The whole point here is not to pull out big, massive quotes as in vivo. It's just a couple words. It's a little bit longer than a descriptive code, but the key difference is that the in vivo is the exact words of the participant. So for age-appropriate transition assessment in that example, maybe that's my descriptive code, but I have an in vivo code and the teacher is saying, yeah, well, we really like to use career assessments and interest inventories. We also use the ARA self-determination scale. We do work site evaluations from site supervisors, right? So we might pull out something particular from that. We might pull out the term work site supervisor evaluations to help us understand that within an employment context for assessment. Just an example. So we have two codes that we'll be using during this semester: descriptive codes and in vivo codes. All right, let's see another example here about descriptive codes. So my quote here, we're imagining this is from a participant. It says, as a high school educator, I definitely need more professional development around service options and programming to really coordinate pre-employment transition services with our state voc counselors. It's like I'm always playing catch up to what others know, trying to understand what the options are and what my role is in supporting my students' participation in them, so on and so on. So in red there, I have always playing catch up to what others know. And rather than taking out that sentence exactly, I have a descriptive code here that says lack of knowledge. So there are many things I could code here, and that's really one of the things you'll find as you start to analyze your data, that it's really a fluid process. It's scientific, but there's also a little bit of an art to it, and you really have to rely on your skills of synthesizing information in order to do this. So in this example here, I've assigned a descriptive code to that particular part of this response. Like I said, there are other things we could code in here, but I'm just showing you one example. On the flip side, let's take a look at in vivo. So this is the same text we just read, but now we're using in vivo coding. So in that first part where they were talking about needing more professional development around service options for pre-ETS, for pre-employment transition services, rather than assigning lack of knowledge to that other part, I took the first part and I said professional development. And notice, this isn't my wording. I took it directly from the participant's response. And I chose it because it really encapsulates at a broad, high level what was happening on here. Just generally the need for professional development. We could even include a little bit more and have need more professional development if we wanted to. So that's an in vivo code. I took the direct words from the participant in order to describe what they were talking about. Let's see an example of in vivo and descriptive together. So here's our passage. One way we integrate the principles of UDL into our work is through our cooperative training program for computer engineering, science, mathematics, and agriculture. So I took an in vivo code right there and I extracted that quote because I saw that it really explained what they're doing in terms of their curriculum, their instruction, right? And it gave context to when they use UDL, how they're doing it. It really tells us about their programming. So then I continue on. Rather than provide examinations on content to the students, we measure the application of knowledge according to their individual contribution to team-driven inquiry-based projects. So from that example, I extracted team-driven inquiry-based projects. So now I know the types of, even further about the types of curricular, instructional, and just more broadly, the pedagogical approaches that they're using in this program. So I know that they have a cooperative training program. That's a key part of information. And in that program, they have a lot of inquiry-based learning with project-based learning. We continue on. We see they continue to talk about having multiple team members. I won't read the full thing, but I want to show you here too, all of these quotes here and really this first half of the response. I could also use the descriptive code of project-based learning. So I may have project-based learning and then my in vivo codes further explain what that is within this context. Do we see here how the in vivo codes are providing additional detail to that descriptive code? So project-based learning, we're saying, okay, well, how? Well, they say, well, it's team-driven and it's inquiry-based and it occurs within a cooperative training program. And the whole goal is for them to access job-related content. So that's how they're doing project-based learning. And at the bottom here, we see they were talking about using AT across multiple contexts, so work and the community, to make them competitive in a technology-driven economy. And I could use a descriptive code there to say assistive technology. So now let's talk process. So we just talked about descriptive coding, we talked about in vivo coding, we saw some examples. And now what we're going to do is talk about how to put these different strategies together into a sequence that you can apply when you're analyzing your data. So your data will come in the form of an interview transcript. And this is a word-for-word record of a participant's responses to your interview protocol. Remember, your interview protocol is a sequence of questions you're going to be asking in order to learn about what's working and then what could be improved, and the who, what, where, when, how, and why behind all of that, and including those factors that contribute to why something is effective and why it could be improved. So there is definitely a science behind analyzing an interview transcript, this word-for-word record of their responses. And here's how it's going to go. First, you're going to read the interview transcript, but you're not going to code it. You're just going to read it like you would normally do anything else. Of course, with a high-level focus, right? So we're going to just read each transcript. And we're going to be focusing on one transcript at a time at first. So we're going to read that transcript from our participant. We are going to then reread the transcript. This is critical. One of the most important things you can do, or the missteps you could make, is to read it on the first time and code it at that first time. You've got to read it once first, get familiar with what they're talking about, and then analyze it and code it. So the second time that you read it, you're going to reread that interview transcript, and you're going to read each response and assign a word or phrase, either a descriptive code or an in vivo code, that describes the main point or points within it. The key here is that as you read the transcript, you're going to be reusing those codes as much as possible. So then you're able to do things like see which codes appeared most often or least often in order to build a summary that really explains what's going on. To that point, when you're reading that transcript, this is what we call within case. So within case is one participant, as opposed to between or across case, which is across multiple participants. So first, you're going to work on each individual transcript, each person, which is called within case. So once your descriptive codes have been assigned to a participant's responses, so you've gone through that entire transcript, like I just said, you're going to look for instances where the same code or similar codes were used more than once. And the questions you're going to have in your head at that point are which codes occurred most often? Which codes just occurred in general? So what are my primary themes that are appearing here? Which themes are appearing most often? How about least often? Did they tell me a bigger story here? And when we talk about that bigger story, what we're going to be doing is then using the codes that we had assigned to that transcript for the within case, the participant, and we're going to develop a summary. So we're going to use the codes and we're going to develop a summary based upon those codes. So we're obviously going to have to add in between the codes in order to make out full sentences, but that's what we're going to be doing. So we're going to take that essential information and build a summary for each participant about what they talked about. In particular, any problems in practice they talked about, and the who, what, where, when, how, factors contributing, all of that good stuff in our summary. We're going to select a few direct quotes, in vivo quotes, to further explain some of our descriptive codes that we have referenced in our summary. We're going to do this whole process for the problems in practice and the strengths as well. So the summary is going to have both of that information in there. So we'll end up with a summary of each participant. So we'll have a summary for participant 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll usually have about 4 in this class, maybe a little bit more. But if you do as many participants as you have, you'll have a summary for each one of them. That's your within case summary. So this is going to be, like I said, built upon those descriptive codes and have some in vivo codes in there as well to further expand upon and explain those descriptive codes. Once you have all these summaries, your next step is to do what we call a between or across case analysis. You're going to be looking across those summaries, you're going to be looking across those transcripts, and you're going to look the same thing again, but now across participants, which codes occurred across those participants. Out of those codes, which occurred most often? How about least often? Were any quotes really similar? Any descriptive or in vivo codes similar? For those main themes here, in particular when they're talking about a problem in practice, you're going to use all of those summaries and all of those codes to create one single summary that explains a problem in practice or perhaps multiple problems in practice that were shared across the participants. So what we want here is a shared picture across the participants of what they all talked about together. We can also include some information about some differences. We can definitely do that, in particular for different roles. If one particular role is explaining a problem a lot differently than another role, we want to include that in our summary and explain that. Remembering that the same code can be used across participants, but the way the code is being used could be very different. You might have a code used for age-appropriate transition assessment, but in some of those transcripts, it's talked about really strongly. And in other transcripts, they're saying, I don't know how to do this. This is a challenge for me. I don't even know how to approach this. I haven't had training on this. So you're going to see this happen. I guarantee it that the codes are going to be reused across participants, and they should be. But the way that the participants are talking about their experiences, how these codes are assigned, are going to be very different sometimes. And that's what we want. We want to see similarities, but we also want to see gaps and differences. That helps us identify a problem in practice. All right, so let's try some of this out. So what I have here is an example. We're going to do within case right now. So we've got a 9th grade special education teacher. We have their an excerpt from their interview right now, and they're talking about the work they're doing based upon my interview protocol. And what I want you to do is to read the transcript, their responses, and then you're going to pause the video and you're going to do some coding for this response. I want you to use descriptive and in vivo codes in order to identify the main themes or points inside of this transcript here. There may or may not be a problem in practice. Maybe they're talking about strengths. Maybe they're talking about problems. We don't know. You'll have to read it and find out. And you're going to be using your descriptive and in vivo codes in order to make sense of this transcript and identify the key themes. So what I want you to do now is to download this transcript as a Word document or pause the video and read it. But either way, you're going to have this Word document in order to analyze and code it. So what I'm going to need you to do is underneath this video in Blackboard, I have a Word document already that has this transcript in there. You're going to take that transcript and you're going to write down on that document. You can either use comments in Microsoft Word, or you can just write below the transcript the themes that you're seeing. You can get really fancy, and we'll see some examples of this when I show you the completed example, but you can do things like highlight particular passages, sentences, or parts of sentences, and then you can use that same color for your code as well. So you might have transition assessment, and you might make that purple inside of the transcript, and then you can have the word transition assessment below in that same purple. And we've seen an example of this previously in our lecture here. If I'll go back and show you. See, I've been doing that already. So you'll see here in our previous examples, we've got our green and we've used purple. So you can use colors that make sense for you. I used red in this example. So what I want you to do is pause the video, like I said, get that Word document, code this transcript, and then once you're done coding, resume the video, and we're going to talk about some of the ways we might have coded this. All right, go ahead and get started. This video will resume its instruction in 10 seconds. Okay, if you haven't paused the video, make sure you do that and complete this activity. We're now going to look at a completed example of this transcript. All right, so we have our within case analysis here of participant 1. So as you read, you learned quite a bit about this 9th grade teacher's experiences in supporting transition age young people with disabilities at this high school. Some of the codes that I have used in this example, and yours might be different, and that's okay. But generally, the key themes here are informal, formative transition assessment, meaning not standardized assessments, and that we're using them on an ongoing basis. That's what formative assessment is, right? So we're using these non-standardized assessments to gather information about our student in this example and to drive instruction. They're doing that on an ongoing basis. So you'll see here that I had coded that aspect about transition assessments, and they were talking about preferences, work styles, right? Reassessing at the end of the year. I called that informal formative transition assessment, and that would be a descriptive code. I used my own words to describe what they were talking about. I also have career exploration. I used my own words to describe when they were talking about students learning about themselves in respect to working. And I also used the descriptive code of work-based learning to describe that the teacher was talking about them learning about different career options and work sites that work better for them in the future and making decisions based upon their experiences. So learning in the workplace, but also doing some reflection. We've got some really important information about worksite development as well. So that's another descriptive code I used. But I thought it was really important to grab an in vivo code to describe the core essence of what that worksite development is in this example. And I pulled out site staff are trained to take a strengths-based approach to working with our students. So I thought that that really encapsulated what worksite development looks like for this 9th grade teacher's perspective. Down below, We learned a little bit more about their curriculum and their instructional methods they're using and assessment as well, and the skills that they're focusing on, of course, and how they're assessing them. And I pulled out some key quotes here. I pulled out class-based learning and community-based instruction. I pulled out whole group project-based learning. Project-based learning. That's something we've already seen in some of our other examples tonight, right? And we also have a descriptive code of informal formative transition assessments. So see here that I've reused that code. When they were talking about their transition assessments, beginning and the end of the program, and assessing preferences and work styles, interests, goals, skills, all of that good stuff. They also talked later on about measuring achievement in soft skills. So a little bit more about those transition assessment skills that are being measured above. We learned about them within the context of that community-based instruction they're doing as well. So my two quotes above help me contextualize maybe how or where that transition assessment is being used in this bottom example. All right, let's try another participant. Same thing as before. You're going to download the Word document underneath this video in Blackboard, and you're going to code this transcript. You're going to have the video paused, and once you're done, you're going to resume the video, and then we'll see an example of it completed. So I'm going to resume instruction, and we're going to look at this example in 10 seconds. So pause the video, and in 10 seconds, I'm going to continue, and we'll get started. All right, let's take a look at this example now that it's been coded. So in our example here, we've got a lot going on. We have some similarities and some themes we may have used across our participants. So let's see what we did. So in this first part, they were talking about career exploration. So I assigned the descriptive code of career exploration to lessons that are designed to sequentially build students' general awareness of careers, so career awareness. And I also assigned the code of work readiness skills development to where they were talking about mastering soft and occupational skills once they get to 12th grade. In that next part, I used work site development again. So we see that work site development, but now they're talking about using culturally responsive instruction. So I have reused my codes. You see, I work readiness, career exploration, work site development. I'm reusing codes across participants here. So now I'm learning more about what this looks like for this program. In that next part, I used informal formative transition assessment again, because they were using job performance self-evaluations, that's informal, and they were using it weekly, so that's formative. We learned that they were doing it with site supervisors when they're evaluating. They're doing performance evaluations on time management, giving and receiving feedback, right? So we're learning all about what this looks like on the work site. And now we get to see not just how informal transition assessment was used with the previous participant, but now we're learning a little bit more about it too, right? So not only to make instructional decisions, but also to help students reflect and learn about themselves. So we also have another instance of using that descriptive code of work readiness skills development, talking about task analysis, breaking down complex work tasks and teaching them to self-monitor their performance in order to take on and really modulate their effort during those complex skills, which is a key work readiness skill, right? So we also have in the bottom part, least most prompts is a descriptive code that I applied when they're talking about their prompting. They were just really giving a lot of detail about it, but generally that's the most important part. So we know what types of instructional methods they're using to support this complex skill development. We have, again, informal formative transition assessment. They're reviewing data in between sessions on their performance. They're using checklists. That would be informal. And we have a new code that we haven't seen before, data-driven community-based instruction. So I use that community-based instruction, but I tagged on data-driven because they were really talking about how they use data to inform their prompting level uh, through sessions in order to support mastery of those skills for their students. So it's not just community-based instruction here, it's data-driven. That's the real focus. All right, so if you haven't noticed already, we're following the process that we talked about before of doing our within case and then doing our between case. So now we're going to do the between case. We've analyzed in this hypothetical example, we have two interviews. We analyzed both of them. Those were the whole interviews. Just imagine for this example. And now we're going to do a between case analysis across those interviews we just analyzed in order to identify big, broad themes and to explain them and summarize what everyone's talking about. So, what I want you to do, like before, is to pause the video, and I want you to attempt to create a between case summary for the two transcripts we just analyzed. So, look across those themes that we have and that you have on yours. So I would like you to use the themes that you've identified rather than the ones that, just the ones I've identified. Maybe yours are the same. You can use a mix of both, but use what you have and what I showed you already to develop a between case summary that really explains across this job coach and across this special education teacher. We want to know what are the main things they've been talking about together. What are the common themes across them? So pause the video, work on that between case summary, and I will resume in 10 seconds. All right. So here's how I would approach a between case summary for these two participants. Rather than giving you the exact written summary, it's more important to understand the blueprint or the structure behind how we might do something like this. So here's the key things that we would want to pull out in our between case summary. We'd want to have information about their informal transition assessment, the formative informal transition assessment. They both talked about it. We want to have the who, what, where, when, how often for this theme. We want to include worksite development. They both talked about it. So they both talked about worksite development in terms of that strength-based approach. That's what the teacher was talking about. And then the job coach was talking about how they supported them in using culturally responsive instructional and coaching methods, right? So they both talked about that. Career exploration. We saw both participants talk about that. Work readiness skills development as well. So we want to draw conclusions across the participants for these key areas, these key themes, in this case, for this particular example. So we could write this up a bunch of different ways, but we would need our between case summary to have this core information in it. We would want to hit on these four main themes here. We could include the other themes as well and talk about differences, but we'd have to have these in order to have a complete summary. We use both participants' responses to further explain those themes. So we could use those in vivo codes to explain the differences that for all the different ways that worksite development is happening in informal, formative transition assessment and work readiness skills development. So we would use those in vivo codes to further explain now. And the beauty of this is that because each participant had talked about different aspects, and this is what's going to happen in your data too, that you get to build out a bigger picture than what could have been done with one response alone. Think about it. If we didn't interview that job coach in this example, we would have never known about those culturally responsive methods, right? We would have never known about the prompting they were using and how they were using data. So we would have had a much smaller view of how they do worksite development and how they do transition assessment if we hadn't got that other interview. You can see just how important that is from that other perspective. So we learned about a strength in practice in this example That's going to happen for yours, but you're going to be really focusing on problems in practice. So what we just did, it doesn't matter if it's a strength or a problem in practice, it's going to be exactly the same thing. You're going to do the same exact process we just talked about. Just the themes you use are going to be applied to different ways in different things. But still within case and then between case and making your summary. Same exact thing. So now that we've talked about coding, let's talk some tech on how we'll get over the hurdle of having audio of your recordings and your transcripts and getting that into text and not having to do that yourself. So here's what we're going to do. There is an online platform called Otter.ai, and this will take your audio files from your interviews and it will turn them into text Word documents for you automatically. So I have a paid service that I will give you all access to in order to use this. I've already created a workspace for us. Each of you have your own folder, and you're going to be working inside of Otter.ai in order to turn your audio transcript into text so you can do the analysis that we just practiced. So I'm going to be sending you an invite from my email. It's going to actually be mfg.flanagan@gmail.com. You're going to get an email that looks just like what you're seeing on the screen here, and it's going to ask you to join GWU on Otter. This is me asking you to join our workspace so you can get access to my account. It's going to ask you to sign up. You're going to make your own account, and you're going to be linked to mine, and we'll be able to work together. So this is not in Google or anything. It's totally separate, but you're going to be joining my account by signing up. I suggest you use something other than your GW email address. Your GW email address will probably block you from doing this. So I recommend using a personal email address in order to get access to this work group for this class. So like I said, I've already created this workspace for us, and you're going to get an email that looks exactly like what I'm showing on the screen. It's probably going to come to your updates inside of your Gmail, and that's how you're going to join this workspace and get access to this tool that I have for you. So once you've signed up, you're going to go into the workspace, and you'll see on the left-hand side of the workspace, there's a folder with each of your names on it. Just go into your folder, leave the other ones. And once you get into your folder, it's going to give you a screen. And in the upper right-hand corner, you're going to see this button that says record. And then you're going to see one that has a little cloud with an up arrow. That's where you're going to upload your audio files one by one for each of your interviews. So you'll have an audio file that you recorded maybe with your phone, most likely, or your computer, possibly. For each interview, you have to get audio from it. You have to record your audio. We need a word for word transcript, not your notes. It has to be audio. We have to have it for this class. So we're going to have your audio from each interview, and we're going to upload that file into your folder on Otter.ai. And when you upload it, it's automatically going to transcribe it for you and turn it into a Word document. So you're going to click on that little cloud, and then you're going to drag and drop or upload each one of your files individually. So one by one, don't upload multiple at a time. What it's going to do is each file is going to get its own Word document. We don't want to upload multiple files and then have all of our transcripts mixed up together. So upload one file at a time, let it make a transcript for you, and then it's going to appear and show like this. So it's going to show your audio for each interview that's been converted into text. It will actually tell you some key information there as well, like how many speakers there were. There's going to be 2, you and the other interviewee. And all I need you to do here, we don't have to worry about their platform. You're not going to be writing or taking notes in Otter.ai. You just want to get the Word document. That's it. That's all we want. Just want the Word document. So we're going to click up on those 3 horizontal dots next to the share button in the right-hand corner. And then we're going to click export. And this secondary window is going to appear. And you're going to change the file format to docx, which is a Word document. and you're going to click export, and it'll download a Word document of your transcript for you. So this is how we're going to transcribe our audio without having to do it manually. We're not going to do it manually. We're going to use this platform in order to make our lives easier. And so, but we do need to have audio for each interview. We've got to do that. So once you have all those Word documents, I will also share with you a student folder in Google Drive. It's got your name on it. It's inside of our class folder. And you're going to be putting all your transcripts in there. So each of these Word documents is going to go in there, and then you're going to code them inside there. And the reason for that is you can tell me at any time to come in and look at how you're coding, and I can help you and give you feedback. This, we don't have to send it to me. And we can work in real time together if we meet virtually. One-on-one, for example. And we can do that during class as well. So you're going to take each of those Word documents, put them in your Google folder that I shared with you, and then you're going to code them there using the strategies we talked about tonight. So that's it for this lecture. Make sure if you didn't follow along during this lecture to do those activities. And I look forward to further reviewing your interview protocols, getting those wrapped up, and really starting to work on analyzing your data with you.